minutes. That's exactly how long Richard Sterling stood there screaming at me in that conference room. I counted every single minute on the industrial wall clock behind his head while 28 people watched. My team, the plant managers, even the new safety inspector who started Monday. All of them just staring. Nobody said a word when he slammed his hand on the table so hard my coffee mug jumped. Nobody moved when he called me a washed-up army reject who couldn't manage a lemonade stand. The production numbers were down 4.8% in my division, and apparently that meant I deserved a public execution. When he finally stopped, my dress shirt was soaked with sweat under my blazer. Nobody said anything for what felt like forever. Then I heard myself say, "Calm as you please, anything else, sir?" He actually looked startled, like he expected me to resign or fight back. "No," he finally said, "just fix it." I nodded, gathered my reports, and walked out without rushing. 28 pairs of eyes watching me go. I held it together until I got to my truck in the parking lot. Then I hit the steering wheel until my knuckles bled. That was Tuesday, May 17th, the day I decided Richard Sterling needed to lose everything. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Marcus Thompson, 48, Senior VP Operations at Apex Manufacturing Corporation, or I was until 6 months ago. People who know me would describe me as methodical, disciplined, the guy who runs his department like a military unit because that's what works. I spent 8 years in Army logistics before moving into corporate operations 22 years ago. My wife Linda calls me obsessively organized, which is her polite way of saying I document everything. But here's something about military-trained people. We understand chain of command. We see weak links in operational security. We know how systems break down. And when someone violates the rules of engagement, we respond accordingly. Before I go deeper into this, if you're really interested in knowing what happened next, could you give this video a like? Also, subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get notified when we upload new videos like these. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because trust me, what I'm about to share might be the most valuable lesson some of you ever learn about corporate warfare. Let me tell you about Richard Sterling, 53, Chief Operations Officer, Harvard MBA. The kind of man who owns a boat but pays someone else to drive it. He'd been with Apex for 19 years and had the CEO's complete confidence. 7 years ago, he personally recruited me for the Senior VP position, telling me my military precision was exactly what operations needed. For 6 years, I delivered. My plants consistently exceeded production targets. Worker safety incidents dropped 40%. Major clients specifically requested my facilities for their most critical orders, but something changed 18 months ago. Sterling stopped acknowledging my successes, started questioning every operational decision, excluded me from strategic planning meetings I'd always attended. I tried addressing it directly, professional conversations about my concerns. He'd nod, promise to look into communication issues, then nothing would change. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting, every production report, standard operational procedure, just in case. Then came the Morrison Industries contract, a massive automotive parts order worth $50 million annually. Sterling assigned it to my Chicago plant, but with impossible deadlines and insufficient tooling budget. When I pointed this out, he smiled and said, "I thought you were exceptional. Marcus, show me that Army discipline." My team worked around the clock for 3 weeks. I didn't see my house except to shower and change clothes. We delivered a flawless production run, meeting every specification Morrison had outlined. The morning of their final inspection, Sterling called me into his office. "There's been a change of plans," he said, not looking up from his computer. "Nolan's team will handle the Morrison walkthrough." Garrett Nolan, the golden boy with an MIT degree and zero manufacturing experience, the one who played racquetball with Sterling every Thursday. "My team has been working on this for 3 weeks," I said, keeping my voice level. "We've addressed every specification, optimized the production line. Nolan's team will benefit from that excellent groundwork." Sterling interrupted, "This isn't personal, Marcus." Morrison specifically requested fresh perspective on scalability. I knew it was a lie. I'd spoken with Morrison's plant manager myself 2 days earlier to confirm delivery schedules. He was expecting me. "I'd like to at least attend the walkthrough," I said. Sterling finally looked at me, his expression almost pitying. "That won't be necessary. Focus on your efficiency numbers. They're looking concerning." I left his office feeling sick because I knew what was happening. I'd seen it before with other senior managers who got too visible, too successful, too much of a threat to Sterling's advancement plans. Later that day, I learned Walsh's walkthrough had gone perfectly. Morrison signed the contract extension. Sterling sent a company-wide email praising Garrett Nolan's innovative production strategies and exceptional client management. My team's name wasn't mentioned once. 3 weeks later came that Tuesday. The public humiliation, 2 hours and 8 minutes of calculated destruction. What Sterling didn't know was that I'd been preparing not for that specific moment, but for something like it. Because military people see patterns forming before civilians even notice there's a problem. That night, I didn't drink beer and feel sorry for myself. I made coffee and opened my laptop. I had 4 folders of evidence already compiled. First, documentation of all the time Sterling had taken credit for operational improvements developed by other departments over the past 4 years. Email chains, meeting recordings where consent was given, production reports with metadata showing original developers. Second, proof that Sterling had manipulated production data on 5 major contracts to make his personal performance look better while making other divisions, including mine, look worse. Third, evidence that Sterling had been quietly steering certain vendor contracts toward his brother-in-law's equipment leasing company, Precision Industrial Solutions, creating a significant conflict of interest that violated company policy and federal procurement regulations. But it wasn't enough. Sterling was too protected, too valuable to the company's current operations. They might reprimand him, maybe transfer him, but they wouldn't remove him, and he would definitely destroy me in the process. I needed leverage that would make it impossible for the company to choose him over justice. So I developed a new operational plan. A 3-phase strategy that would take months to execute. It would require patience, perfect timing, and the willingness to risk everything. But when you've already lost your dignity in front of 28 colleagues, the risk calculation changes completely. Phase 1, I needed allies. Carefully selected, strategically positioned people who had also suffered under Sterling's leadership, but still had credibility within the company. I started with James Rodriguez, a brilliant plant floor manager who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times, despite having the best safety record in the company. Sterling had once asked him in a meeting if his cultural perspective made him naturally better at managing hourly workers. I invited him to lunch at a diner 15 miles from headquarters. "I'm not here to complain about Sterling," I told him after we ordered. "I'm here because I'm planning to do something about him, and I think you might want to be involved." He studied me for a long moment. "What exactly are you planning?" "Justice," I said. "But I need to know you're committed before I share operational details." James sipped his coffee. "The Morrison contract wasn't the first time he's stolen credit from your team, was it? No? And you weren't the only one he's made cultural comments about." He nodded slowly. "I'm listening." Next was Sarah Mitchell from Quality Control, who'd compiled a report showing systematic safety shortcuts that could trigger federal violations. Sterling had buried her report. Then Kevin Walsh from Safety Compliance, who'd been silenced when he raised concerns about vendor equipment that didn't meet OSHA standards. One by one, I built a small coalition, never meeting as a group, never communicating through company systems, using encrypted messaging apps and meeting at locations with no corporate surveillance. Phase 2, we needed more evidence, the kind that couldn't be explained away or buried in committee reviews. Sarah helped me understand exactly what regulatory lines Sterling had crossed. Kevin showed me how to trace vendor payments through the complex web of company accounts. James taught me how to document the gap between reported safety metrics and actual plant floor conditions. For 5 weeks, I got to work at 6 a.m. and didn't leave until 8 p.m. I performed my actual job flawlessly. No chance I was giving Sterling even the smallest excuse to come after me again. But every free moment was spent building our case. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sterling's executive assistant, Betty Carson, sent me a meeting invitation with just a location, the maintenance shop, Building C. When I arrived, she was already there, looking nervous. "I don't have long," she said without preamble, "but you should know Mr. Sterling has been meeting with the CEO about restructuring operations. They're discussing eliminating your position entirely." My stomach dropped. "Why are you telling me this?" Her eyes hardened. 4 years ago, Mr. Sterling made comments about my age and appearance affecting my professional image. When I documented it through HR, the complaint mysteriously disappeared. I was told continuing to pursue outdated grievances could impact my employment. I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm not looking for sympathy," Betty said. "I'm looking for accountability. I have access to Mr. Sterling's calendar, emails, and files. I've been documenting things that seemed questionable." She handed me a small USB drive. "This contains evidence of Mr. Sterling deliberately manipulating production reports to make certain divisions look worse while inflating his own performance metrics. There are emails proving he diverted vendor contracts to Precision Industrial Solutions, his brother-in-law's company, in exchange for kickbacks totaling over $200,000. And most importantly, a pattern of targeting employees, particularly older workers and minorities, who he viewed as threats to his advancement." That night, I reviewed Betty's files. They contained exactly what we needed to trigger not just internal investigations, but potential federal scrutiny of procurement practices and safety violations. We now had enough evidence to remove Sterling permanently, but releasing it would create a scandal that would devastate hundreds of innocent employees. The company's stock would crash, people would lose retirement savings. I needed a surgical strike, not a nuclear bomb. That's when I formulated Phase 3. I would convince the board of directors that removing Sterling quietly was in everyone's best interest. I would present irrefutable evidence in a way that gave them no choice but to act. And I would ensure Sterling couldn't retaliate against anyone in the process. The annual board meeting was scheduled for the following month at corporate headquarters. Every senior executive would be there, including the CEO and Sterling. I wasn't invited, my level wasn't high enough, but Sarah from Quality Control would be presenting on regulatory compliance. We spent 4 weeks preparing a presentation unlike any other. We compiled the evidence into clear, undeniable exhibits, production data, email trails, vendor payment records, safety violation documentation, everything meticulously verified and cross-referenced. Sarah would have exactly 10 minutes to present on regulatory compliance before the lunch break. We rehearsed how she would transition from general compliance overview to specific violations concerning one executive, without naming Sterling until the evidence was displayed on screen. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. We had one shot. If it failed, we would all likely lose our jobs, possibly face legal retaliation. Sterling had powerful allies. At 3:47 a.m., my phone rang. Sarah, her voice tight with panic. They've moved my presentation to after lunch, and they've cut my time to 5 minutes. My mind raced. Could be coincidence. There's more, Sarah continued. Sterling cornered me at the reception, said he was looking forward to discussing my future with the company. He knows something's happening. I closed my eyes, running tactical scenarios. Where's the CEO right now? Still at the reception. Most people are heading to dinner. Is your presentation ready to go? Loaded on your laptop? Yes? But Marcus, I can't just walk up to him. You can. We've come too far to abort the mission now. Find James. Tell him to create a distraction during dinner. Something significant enough to clear the room, but not serious enough to end the event. Then get the CEO alone. Tell him you have urgent safety information he needs to see before tomorrow's session. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in my truck outside headquarters, checking my phone every few minutes. Finally, at 9:15 p.m., Sarah called back. It worked, she said, her voice mixing disbelief and relief. James spilled an entire tray of drinks on the governor's wife. While everyone was helping clean up, I got 8 minutes with the CEO. Told him I had urgent information about safety violations that couldn't wait until tomorrow. My heart was pounding. What did he say? He watched the first 3 minutes of the presentation and stopped me. Said we needed to take this to his suite immediately. Marcus, he called an emergency session with 4 board members. They watched everything. I leaned against my truck, and Sterling, no idea. He wasn't there. But the CEO's assistant was making calls as I left. The next morning, I woke to 5 missed calls from Sarah, and a text that just said, check your email now. I scrambled for my laptop. A message from the CEO's office requesting that I join an urgent video call at 8 a.m. sharp. The time was 7:43. When the call connected, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The CEO, Harold Patterson, sat at a conference table with 5 board members and the company's general counsel. Mr. Thompson, Harold said, his face unreadable. Thank you for joining us on short notice. We've reviewed some troubling information regarding Richard Sterling's conduct and business practices. Information that appears to have been gathered by you and several colleagues over a significant period. Is that correct? I took a breath. No tactical retreat available. Yes, sir. After experiencing a pattern of inappropriate behavior and witnessing potential safety violations and financial misconduct, I felt obligated to document these issues for operational security. One board member leaned forward. Why didn't you bring these concerns through proper channels? HR ethics hotline? I looked directly at the camera. With respect, sir, I did twice. Both complaints were dismissed without investigation. Additionally, Mr. Sterling's assistant filed age discrimination complaints that mysteriously disappeared from HR records. The room went silent. Harold exchanged glances with the general counsel. Mr. Thompson, Harold finally said, we're conducting an immediate investigation into all these allegations. Mr. Sterling has been placed on administrative leave pending results. We'd like you to come to headquarters today to provide a complete statement. Of course, I said, still waiting for the counterattack. And Mr. Thompson, Harold added, while we don't endorse the methodology by which this information was gathered and presented, we do appreciate the courage it took to bring it forward. Please be assured there will be no retaliation against you or your colleagues. 2 weeks later, Harold sent a company-wide email. After a thorough investigation, we have determined that Richard Sterling engaged in behavior inconsistent with our values and violated multiple company policies. Mr. Sterling is no longer with Apex Manufacturing, effective immediately. We are committed to creating a workplace where all employees are treated with respect and where safety and integrity are never compromised. But there was no mention of the financial misconduct, no acknowledgement of the careers he damaged, no apology to those he discriminated against. That afternoon, I was called to Harold's office. He sat behind his desk looking tired. Mr. Thompson, he said, gesturing to a chair, I wanted to personally inform you that Mr. Sterling has been terminated for cause, without severance. The investigation confirmed the issues you raised. Some of them, I said. Sir, with respect, what about the people whose careers he damaged? The safety violations, the vendor kickbacks? Harold leaned forward. Those matters are being addressed through proper channels. As for careers being damaged, including yours, I've personally reviewed recent performance evaluations and compensation decisions. Appropriate adjustments will be made. What about public accountability? Will the company acknowledge what actually happened? Harold's expression tightened. Mr. Thompson, you've achieved your objective. Sterling is gone. But dragging the company through public scandal helps no one. It hurts shareholders, employees, clients. I met his gaze steadily. What I achieved was documentation. What I want is accountability, not just for Sterling, but for the system that protected him while he hurt people. Harold was quiet for a moment. What exactly are you requesting? A public statement acknowledging the full scope of the violations, a formal apology to everyone affected, and a third-party audit of all promotion decisions and safety reports made under Sterling's influence over the past 5 years. That's completely unreasonable, Harold said. The legal and financial implications would be significant. Not as significant, I interrupted, as what would happen if the full evidence became public. If federal regulators open investigations into the safety and procurement violations. His eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? It's a tactical assessment, I said calmly. I'm not the only one with copies of the evidence, sir. 5 days later, Apex Manufacturing issued a public statement more comprehensive than anything I'd expected. It acknowledged systematic discrimination, safety violations, and procurement misconduct by a former executive. It announced the third-party audit I'd requested. It included an apology to those whose careers and safety were negatively impacted. The statement didn't name Sterling, but industry insiders knew exactly who it meant. 3 days after the statement, I got a call from a journalist asking for comment. I declined, but the story ran anyway, with anonymous sources describing Sterling's behavior in detail. Then another publication picked it up. Within 2 weeks, Richard Sterling became a case study in toxic leadership and corporate accountability failures. A month later, I was promoted to Chief Operations Officer with a 40% salary increase. Harold personally delivered the news. We both knew it wasn't just recognition of my abilities, it was insurance against potential lawsuits, but I took it anyway. James got his long overdue promotion to regional manager. Sarah became head of a newly created safety compliance division. Kevin was appointed to lead vendor oversight. Even Betty was offered a position with better pay and clear advancement opportunities. I stayed in the COO role for exactly 8 months, long enough to implement new safety protocols and vendor oversight systems, long enough to ensure the changes were permanent. Then I made a decision that surprised everyone, including my wife Linda. I resigned to start Thompson Industrial Consulting, specializing in operational efficiency and workplace culture transformation. Are you sure about this? Linda asked me the night before I submitted my resignation. We were sitting on our back porch watching our daughter Lisa practice for her high school soccer team in the yard. Our son Andrew was home from college for the weekend. Studying at the kitchen table, you've got everything you wanted. COO position, respect, the whole company reformed. I watched Lisa nail a perfect corner kick. I've got what Sterling had. A position in a system that still protects people like him until someone forces their hand. The moment I leave, they'll revert to type. Linda nodded slowly. She understood. After 22 years of marriage, she knew how my mind worked. So what's the plan? Build something better. Help other companies fix their problems before they need someone like me to document everything for months. The transition wasn't easy. Starting Thompson Industrial Consulting meant taking a significant pay cut initially, giving up corporate benefits, risking everything on the belief that other companies would pay for expertise in preventing toxic leadership. But word travels fast in manufacturing circles. Within 6 months, we had our first major client, an automotive supplier in Detroit whose employees were filing safety complaints. Today, Thompson Industrial has 15 employees and clients across the Midwest. We help manufacturing companies identify and address toxic leadership before it becomes entrenched. We design safety and accountability systems that don't rely on individual courage to function. We train middle management to recognize and report misconduct before it reaches crisis levels. And Sterling? Last I heard, he was working as a freelance consultant out of his basement. It's not going well. Turns out when you Google his name, the first page of results is all about misconduct and termination. Digital records are forever. I sleep better now. The memories of those 2 hours and 8 minutes don't wake me up anymore. Sometimes I still tense up when executives raise their voices in meetings, but I'm working on that. At Apex, they became a client 4 months ago. Harold retired, and the new CEO is serious about cultural transformation. Look, sometimes accountability has to be forced, but once it starts, it can build its own momentum. What I did wasn't just personal revenge, though I won't lie. Seeing Sterling's career destroyed felt good. It was refusing to let another generation of dedicated workers get destroyed by toxic leadership. It was standing up not just for myself, but for James, Sarah, Kevin, Betty. For everyone who'd been hurt by a system designed to protect people like Sterling at the expense of people like us. If you're watching this and you're dealing with something similar at your workplace, here's what I learned. Document everything systematically. Build strategic alliances with people who've been hurt the same way. Know that you're not paranoid for feeling targeted, trust your instincts, and understand that systems can change, but rarely from within. Sometimes you have to walk away to make the biggest impact. That's how real change happens in corporate America. One documented violation, one courageous witness, one strategic operation at a time. I stood alone in that conference room for 2 hours and 8 minutes while 28 people watched Sterling destroy my reputation, but I'm not standing alone anymore. And if you're fighting the same fight, neither are you.